Welcome into the Steelers Talk Live Show. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Thank you guys for joining us here on a Thursday to talk some Steelers football ahead of this week's matchup versus the Pussycats, the Cincinnati Bengals, trying to get our revenge after losing to those suckers on Thursday Night Football a couple weeks back. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today. We have so much news and rumors to talk about today, guys, that we have not one but two doses of it. Our first two segments are going to be news and rumors surrounding the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then we'll get into your questions that you guys have surrounding the black and gold for this Week 11 mailbag. If you got a question about the Pittsburgh Steelers, about Aaron Rodgers, about the team itself, about Asante Samuel Jr., about anything else that you guys might have questions about, I'm happy to answer those questions on today's show. So make sure you guys get down there in the comment section and let me know who is here for today's live show. Spam those me's. We got over 230 people watching live right now. Make sure you click that thumbs up icon. We cannot get into our first segment of the day until we get to 50 likes. We need 15 more likes. Who's all here? We got Alex Lanier, we got Kevin Reed, we got Eugene Payne, my lovely fiance Cassie Vogt is here. Everyone say hi to Cassie. We got Chuck Dugan, Craig, Enzo, Big Dog, Jay Madden, Craig. We've got Robert, Enzo, John, the Ware family. We've got Mr. Deadhead. We got Gustavo. We got Tyler, we got Fat Grayson, we've got John Anderson, we got Alex Lanier again, we've got Michael Kirk. What's up, Kirk? Good to see you, my friend. We got John Fitzgerald Kennedy, Ollie the Reaper is here, Devin, got John, we've got Isaac, Sean, Derek, and we just passed over 50 likes, so thank you guys so much. If you guys got a question that you want to get on the mailbag today, make sure you guys use hashtag Steelers down there in the live chat room, or you guys can super chat to guarantee your question gets on the mailbag. Last week we had so many super chats that we didn't have any regular questions on the mailbag. It was all super chats, so you guys might want to get a super chat in if you want to make sure that your question gets on the show today. So greatly appreciate your guys' support. And again, if there's a topic that you want me and Ponzi to discuss on today's show, you guys can donate to the show via YouTube super chats. If you don't know how to super chat, there's a money symbol icon right down there in the live chat room. You guys can click that, put any dollar amount that you guys want along with your question. We'll make sure to get that question on today's edition of Steelers Talk. So speaking of Ponzi, let's bring him on here. Mr. Ponzi, how we doing this beautiful Thursday?
Doing pretty good.
All right, man. Well, obviously last week versus the Chargers, not a great performance for the Steelers offense. The only person that was really doing anything was Jaylen Warren. And, per the usual. And this wide receiver room, by the way, this is, I think I had put in a new question for this, didn't I?
You did not.
I did not. All right. Well, I was going to talk about our pin question today, which is, will Aaron Rodgers bounce back this week? Because obviously last week it was by far his worst performance as a Pittsburgh Steeler, in my opinion. And there's a lot of talk this week about how he's too old and how he's washed up and all this different stuff. But personally, I just think that we can allow for one bad performance. There's a lot of quarterbacks that have bad weeks that come back the next week and play really well. Now, if he has really bad performances against, say, the Cincinnati Bengals defense, which is historically bad, or if he has a really bad performance against the Bears, which also isn't a great defense this year, then I will start to worry. But the Chargers defense is legitimately really, really good. They know what they're doing with Jesse Minter and Jim Harbaugh there in LA. They know what they're doing on the defensive side of the ball. I think Aaron missed some throws, but I don't think that we've seen a lot of those misses this year. I think for the most part, he's been pretty accurate. He's been pretty good. And I think that he's going to bounce back in a major way this week. What say you, Ponzi?
I mean, I think the good thing that Steelers fans have going for them is that it wasn't underthrows. It didn't look like he couldn't get the ball to the receivers. It more looked like they weren't on the same page. And I think
I just think Rodgers missed them. He overthrew them.
Yeah, that's what I'm more getting to. On the DK Metcalf ball, I think he expected him to run a little bit more slanted towards the end zone, and he just overthrew it. And he was open. Metcalf was open. He just overthrew it.
Well, DK took blame for that. He said that he cut off his route too flat. He said he should have tried it. He should have continued running towards the end zone, which is where Rodgers threw it. So maybe even that one wasn't actually the biggest miss of the day. I actually think probably the worst miss of the day was when he tried to hit DK on that slant. It ends up, clearly overthrowing him. goes right into the arms of a safety, and there's a couple other overthrows in this game too. And Rodgers just didn't have a good game. All right, but you know what? Like Tom Brady had bad games. All right, even in Tom Brady, we're going to talk about in our first segment today. He actually had a worse game in his first season with his new team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they ended up going on to win the Super Bowl that year. All right, so I'm not saying the Steelers are going to win the Super Bowl this year or anything like that, guys. Don't freak out. I'm just saying that good quarterbacks are allowed to have bad games as long as they bounce back from them and they make them more of the exception and not the rule. So I guess we'll see if Aaron Rodgers can bounce back in the weeks to come. I'm certainly hoping that he does, and if he plays well this weekend, I think that we can rest assured that maybe that game against the Chargers was kind of an outlier performance for him. $5 from Justin Yankuski says, what would Coach Jack Sperry at do at QB realistically?
So like, what would you do at QB?
If we realistically lose the next two games. Okay, so you're talking about for the rest of the season? If we lose the next two games, what would the record be then? We'd be at 5-6. I would still go, I mean, depending on how, I need more context than this, Justin. Like, why are we losing the games? Is the defense playing poorly? Is Aaron Rodgers, like, absolutely god-awful? I think that I'm probably going with Aaron Rodgers until the playoff hopes are dead. Until the playoff hopes are dead, I'm probably sticking with Aaron Rodgers. And then, if it gets to a point where, like, the playoffs clearly aren't going to be in the Steelers' future, we have a game or two to get Will Howard some time out there, I would certainly be open to that. But, it'd have to be pretty bad over the next two games, Justin, for me to even consider going with a different quarterback other than Aaron Rodgers. I think that, this has been, his season, and, you're going to give him the rest of the season at least until, your chances of making the postseason are over. So that's what I'd say at this point. $5 from Cody says, what would you think of Sellers or Levitt and Howard under Rodgers for a year and then QB competition in 2027? Let's face it, man. Well, first of all, I don't think Levitt's coming out. He got injured, and he's only a redshirt sophomore, so I think he's coming back to school. So Levitt's probably not even going to be in the conversation. But then Lenore Sellers, he might go back to school as well. There's some talk about him transferring and coming back for his senior year. Personally, I think that he should come out because I think he'd be a first-round pick this year, even despite his imperfections. Right? He just has a lot of stuff that you can't teach. And Anthony Richardson got taken in the top 5 of the draft, and he was one of the most raw quarterback prospects you could ever dream up. I think Sellers is further along in his development than Richardson was, and Richardson went top 5. So I think Sellers should come out, and I think if you can get Sellers and then you have him under a year from under Rodgers, I think that's the perfect setup for him. It allows him to develop at the NFL level without having to see the field for an entire season. And then in 2027, he can take the field. But I got to tell you, Cody, if you take a quarterback early in the draft, Will Howard's not a part of the conversation. All right, you're not gonna have a competition between Lenore Sellers and Will Howard in 2027 if you spend a premium draft asset on the other quarterback, right? So if you draft Sellers early, you trade up for him, whatever. You just have too much invested in him to just play a 6th-round pick above him. That just doesn't make any sense. So if you go get Sellers, he's your guy of the future. That's the guy they're going to go with. And if Sellers sucks, maybe Will Howard is still on the team, and then he gets a chance to play, and then he ends up playing well. But Sellers is going to get that first opportunity. That's just the way it works in the National Football League, guys. 1st-round picks, 2nd-round picks, they're going to get opportunities before 6th-rounders. That's just the way that it works.
And I feel like a lot of people get this mixed up with the 49ers because I've heard a couple people compare Will Howard to like Brock Purdy. The reason why Brock Purdy got those games in, 2023?
Garoppolo got hurt.
Because Garoppolo got hurt and Trey Lance got hurt.
Yep.
If Trey Lance was able to come back on the field, I think the 49ers would have probably just started Lance because they started Lance over Garoppolo. So, I mean, it wasn't because they thought that Purdy had more. It was because they had to start Purdy.
Yeah.
There was no other way, and he turned out to be great.
And listen, if Howard gets an opportunity at the end of the year and he balls out and he looks great, then by all means, especially if Rodgers is like, yeah, this kid's ready to take the reins, by all means, we can make Will Howard the franchise quarterback. But what I don't want to do is, have it be a J.J. McCarthy situation where we don't see Howard play the entire year, including preseason, and then all of a sudden next year, if they want to go try and win a championship, say, okay, Will Howard, 6th-round pick that's never played in the NFL, go win us a Super Bowl this year. In Cam Hayward's final year to try and make him a champion. It's just not realistic, guys, right? It's just not. So, unless he proves something this year, which it's Rodgers' season, guys. Unless he gets injured or unless the season completely goes to shit, we're not going to see Will Howard this year. So I'm rooting for Will. I think he's a great kid, and he works hard, and he's got a lot of physical traits that give him starter quality upside, in my opinion. I just don't know, him being a 6th-round pick really puts him in the right position to get opportunities to be the franchise QB. So we'll see what ends up happening in the future. But $2 from Bernard says, should the Steelers bench A-Rod? No, Bernard, they shouldn't bench A-Rod. It's one bad game. He has looked pretty darn good throughout the first, what was it, 8 games before that last week's game. Like I think he's going to be fine. All right, let's give it a couple more weeks of really bad quarterback play before we start talking about benching him. Okay. $10 from Alex L says, if Rodgers wets the bed again, do we bench him during the game? Probably not this week, Alex, but there is a point there where if it's like a whole month of really bad football and the season's really slipping away, then you got to make a change. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think, quarterbacks have bad weeks. And I think Rodgers, especially against these next 2 opponents, Cincinnati and Chicago's defenses stink. So I think Rodgers is certainly he's going to be laser focused. I think that he is really going to be, dedicating, his time and his work and all that stuff like he usually does to be the best quarterback that he can be for this football team. And I do think after last week's performance that this offense is going to bounce back in the next 2 weeks. $2 from Bernard again says, is Tomlin mad at A-Rod? No, absolutely not. I mean, Tomlin's the reason why A-Rod is here, right? So those guys have a fantastic relationship. It's been well documented. One bad game is not going to get these guys to, make these guys at each other's throats. It's just not going to happen. And then we got Bernard says, A-Rod throws fastballs sometimes. He throws fast. He still has good arm strength. I don't know exactly what you want me to say to that, Bernard, but yeah, he still has the arm strength. He absolutely does. That has not been deteriorated at all. $5 from Steelers fan 151 says, what's your opinion on getting a corner first round over a QB? I'm open to anything at this point, Steelers fan. I really am, but especially if Asante Samuel Jr. pans out, he's going to be playing on the outside. I would bring back Asante Samuel Jr. if you can, especially for the right price tag. So, we'll see how it pans out the rest of the year, but I'm open to anything at this point. If you want to go get another corner, I think there's other positions I'd probably go other than corner. Wide receiver, quarterback at this point in time, I'd probably rather go quarterback. Maybe offensive guard. That might be a big need for this team heading into next offseason. So, it's just too early to have that conversation right now, Steelers fan. But at this point, I'm open to everything. Okay, I really am. So we are going to get into our first segment of the day here. Our first slate of news and rumors is coming up here. We got over 400 people watching live. Thank you so much for watching today's Steelers Talk live show. We'll also have a second dose of Steelers news and rumors coming up in our second segment, and then we will answer your questions on the mailbag. So again, guys, a reminder, #Steelers along with your question down there in the live chat to put your question in contention to be on the mailbag. And if you super chat, it guarantees your question gets on the show. So without further ado, let's get into our first segment of the day. The first slate of Steelers news and rumors is coming at you right now. Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Today we have a lot to talk about here on the show. First up, Jon Gruden, former NFL head coach and QB guru, says that he is very much in on a 6th-round pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Will Howard, doubling down on his very positive draft evaluation from the former Buckeye. We'll talk about that at the top of today's show. Then later, I'm going to tell you about how defensive coordinator Teryl Austin can attack Cincinnati's offense and get this defense playing better than it did back in Week 7. And then we'll finish up today's show with a reason to hope for Aaron Rodgers to bounce back after that really putrid performance versus the Los Angeles Chargers last week. Now, before we get into the content today, I would really appreciate it if you've been watching our channel for a while, you watch our shows, and you appreciate the content we provide here for free on this channel. Click that subscribe button if you haven't already. We are only 72 subscribers away from 104,000. I'd love to get there before we kick things off against the Bengals on Sunday. So if you're somebody that hasn't clicked that subscribe button yet, and really new viewers, I'm talking to you guys, all right, all the real ones that have already clicked that subscribe button, we greatly appreciate all of your guys' support. But all the new people that haven't clicked that subscribe button yet, I would greatly appreciate it click that subscribe button. You guys get free, informative, and entertaining Steelers coverage every single day for clicking that subscribe button. So what are you waiting for? Make it happen right now. All right, so let's get into Will Howard here, where former NFL head coach Jon Gruden went on Pittsburgh radio today, and he says he'll be quote-unquote shocked if Will Howard isn't a good NFL starting quarterback. That's absolutely crazy to me, man. But here's what Jon Gruden has to say about Will Howard. He says, I just think Will Howard has everything you're looking for in an NFL QB. He's got that prototype size I like. He's 6'4", he's 225, 230. He's built like a horse. I mean, he's a big guy who can run the ball. You can run the quarterback power plays and all these quarterback draws that everybody likes to run. He can keep it on the zone read. He's an accurate passer. He's a winner, man. This guy's a winner. He won the Big 12 at Kansas State, and they won the Big 12. He won the national title. He has the wow factor. He's got a photographic memory. He's a great communicator. I'll be shocked if he's not one hell of an NFL quarterback. And I told a couple of my friends in Pittsburgh, I told Omar Khan, quote, I can't believe you got him in the 6th round, unquote. So Jon Gruden still very high on Will Howard at this point in time. And even back during draft season, he compared Will Howard to former NFL MVP Josh Allen. I mean, that is incredibly high praise. And, Jon Gruden certainly puts his upside at NFL superstar as a 6th round pick. And, the first thing that comes to my mind when I hear Jon Gruden hype up these quarterback prospects, guys, is has he ever talked negatively about any of these guys? Because I remember back in the day when he was talking about Johnny Manziel as the number 1 quarterback in that year's draft class. I remember how much he was hyping up Josh Johnson in his draft class and how much he really believed in him. And it's just like, I don't know if I've ever seen Jon Gruden actually talk negatively about a young NFL QB prospect. So first of all, that's just the first thing to get out of the way, is that he's kind of somebody that's a positivity broker and he doesn't really deal with talking about the negatives in a player. But I would love for Gruden to be right about Will Howard, man. I really, really would, because if he's Josh Allen, we're getting a Josh Allen for the price of a 6th round pick. I mean, sign me up for that, man, especially for a kid as good of a person, as good of a teammate as Will Howard is, man. He could be the face of this franchise, and if that happens and he's winning Super Bowls for this team, and, he's going toe-to-toe with Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes for the next couple decades, and he's the next great Steelers quarterback, I would be absolutely thrilled with that. I'm just not sure if he has that caliber of upside that Jon Gruden seems to think that he has. But I will say this, and I've been saying this since the day the Steelers drafted Will Howard. I think he does have starting quarterback upside in the National Football League. I really do. He's got great size, like John points out. He is somewhat athletic. I don't think he's a dynamic rusher, but he can certainly run the ball in a little bit of a straight line. He's more of a straight line kind of athlete than somebody that's going to make you miss in space, like a Lamar Jackson, for example. He's got a big arm, can throw the ball down the field. He's got a good mind, all those different things. Like, all those things are valid points about Will Howard, and those traits combined, give him the upside of an NFL starting quarterback. But like I said, guys, I don't think the upside is as high as Jon Gruden thinks. Like, he's comparing him to Josh Allen, who is like one of the greatest super weapons at the quarterback position we have ever seen in the National Football League. And when I watched Will Howard on tape at Ohio State, I saw somebody that was more of the kin of like a Derek Carr, somebody that's kind of like a mid-level starter, somebody that, can throw the ball down the field, good size. By the way, Jon Gruden, big Derek Carr fan as well, by the way. He was a huge Derek Carr guy. I just feel like Will Howard is more of that kind of quarterback at his upside, where he could get to that point where he's a pretty decent mid-level starter that you can win games with. If you can put a great supporting cast around him, you might even be able to compete for a Super Bowl. But Derek Carr never even won a playoff game in the National Football League, and a part of the reason for that is that he is a limited quarterback, and I do think even at his upside, Will Howard is also a limited quarterback because he just doesn't bring the playmaking instincts, the out-of-structure playmaking ability, and the dynamic rushing ability that all the top guys in the league bring. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, all these guys bring some really crazy stuff after, outside of structure, and I just don't see that on Will Howard's film from Ohio State. Now, could it always develop? Yeah, maybe, but I think if you're banking on that at this point, I think, that's a pretty foolish way to go about constructing an NFL football team. And in a loaded AFC where he's going to have to compete against the Burrows and the Lamars and the Mahomeses and now the Drake Mays, it's like, I just don't know if Will Howard on a second contract making $60+ million per season is going to be able to compete with those guys. And, for the people that say, well, after this year, Rodgers will retire and then we can start Will Howard. I mean, at that point, we likely won't see Will Howard at all at that point, even in the preseason. And then you're at risk of putting yourself in a situation that the Minnesota Vikings are in, where the Vikings really went all in to try and win a championship this year. And they went with a quarterback that was completely unproven, a first-round pick in J.J. McCarthy, and he is not up to snuff. That team is not a Super Bowl contender with J.J. McCarthy under center this year, and the Steelers could be putting themselves in a very similar situation. I mean, they could figure out, the wide receiver situation. They could completely fix the O-line. They could have the defense playing at a top 3 level. It wouldn't matter. If Will Howard is a pumpkin and he stinks, you have no chance of winning a Lombardi trophy, whereas if you bring back Aaron Rodgers for another season or you bring in another veteran quarterback or something of that kind, you might have a chance to actually compete for a championship in 2026. And listen, man, maybe things will go to hell this year and Aaron Rodgers just sucks the rest of the way and the team gets out of playoff contention and, Will Howard gets an opportunity to play this year and he gets his shot. And if that happens, if he plays well, I do have an open mind with going with Will Howard in 2026 if he proves this year that he can be a good player and can produce at the NFL level. But I do think at this point, guys, whether Jon Gruden or whether this fan base likes it, the most likely scenario is that Pittsburgh's going to draft a quarterback early in the NFL draft next year. They have a ton of draft capital as well as a 2027 first-round pick at their disposal. They've got, the ammo to trade up for a quarterback in the first round if they really fall in love with somebody. And, if they are within striking distance of getting somebody that they believe can be their legitimate next franchise quarterback, I think Omar Khan is going to pull the trigger on that, and maybe Will Howard can be the team's long-term backup, or maybe if the guy they trade up for stinks, he gets an opportunity and he plays well. But, the chances as a sixth-round pick quarterback, they're pretty slim. And I just don't know if the Pittsburgh Steelers are actually going to give him the opportunity to be this team's franchise quarterback. But also, man, I am open to passing on a quarterback in next year's NFL draft as well. If Rodgers wants to come back and he says, hey, man, this Will Howard guy, give him another year to learn behind me. He can be your guy. Maybe the Omar Khan and the Steelers do hold off drafting a quarterback for another year if that's the case. And they go out and get a wide receiver or an offensive guard or a cornerback in the first round next spring. There's a lot of different things that could happen at this point in time. And absolutely, I think that Aaron Rodgers could be Will Howard's kind of biggest champion. And if he recommends to Omar Khan and to Mike Tomlin, obviously Omar and Mike respect Aaron Rodgers and his opinion quite a bit. If Rodgers goes to them and says, hey, man, this Will Howard guy, he's got to be your next starting quarterback, I think that the Steelers will certainly take that into account. So at this point, it's just too early to know what's going to happen with a guy like Will Howard. I think that he could be a starting level quarterback in this league if he properly develops, but I do question, A, if he's even going to get the opportunity before the Steelers draft another quarterback, and B, if he does pan out, will he be good enough to, give that second contract of $60+ million per season to compete with the league's greats here in the AFC. So what say you guys? Let me know down there in the comment section. Will Will Howard be our next franchise quarterback here in Pittsburgh? Give me a yes or a no down there in the comment section for today's pinned question. Just a second here. I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today at Prize Picks. And while I tell you about Prize Picks, simply give me a yes or a no down there in the comments. And with that, let's have a word from our sponsor today at Prize Picks. And the hard-hitting football action this season is just getting started, and it's even better with our friends at Prize Picks. The weather might be changing outside, but the feeling of being right never gets old, folks. So keep the season rolling on with Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. Prize Picks is super simple to play. Just pick more than or less than on at least 2 player stat projections. If you get your picks right, you could cash in. On Prize Picks, how you play is up to you. If you want flexibility, choose the flex play where you can get paid even if one of your picks misses. And if you really know ball and you want the bigger payouts, go for the power play. No matter how you play, though, Prize Picks is a great way to put your takes to the test. Join millions of users and sign up for America's #1 fantasy sports app. So for this weekend's game against the Bengals, guys, I'm going to take the more on Aaron Rodgers passing yards. I think he bounces back this week. I'm taking the more on Jaylen Warren rushing yards, and I'm taking the less on Joe Flacco passing yards. I think the Steelers' defense plays a lot better this time around. Now, you guys can download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup on the Prize Picks app today. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. So speaking of this weekend's matchup versus the Cincinnati Bengals, I think that Pittsburgh Steelers defensive coordinator Teryl Austin should actually look to himself and learn a lesson from himself for how to beat the Bengals offense this week and how to shut down guys like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, at least to what degree it's possible, because those two guys are pretty special dudes. But, I think what he should do is he should actually go back to his first ever game that he was the defensive play caller for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that, of course, was back in 2022 in the season opener versus the Bengals in Cincinnati in the jungle, where it was a pretty impressive performance for the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, if you'll remember. Of course, that was the famous game where Minkah Fitzpatrick blocks the game-winning PAT. They go to overtime, and they end up winning that game. But you take a look at what the defense was able to do. I mean, they were on the field for a whopping 94 snaps in that game, both in regulation and in overtime, and they only gave up 20 points in those 94 defensive snaps. That is insane to be on the field that much and to give up that few points. Only 4.6 yards per play, just so you guys know, the lowest in the league this year is 5, and that's the Denver Broncos. This year, they're the number one defense in the league in yards per play allowed this year on defense. The Steelers defense only allowed 4.6 yards per play to Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins that day, and they turned them over 5 times. They kept them in that ball game, and they won that football game for the Pittsburgh Steelers at the top of the 2022 campaign. And what the game plan looked like for Teryl Austin in his first ever game as this team's DC was they played a lot of Tampa 2. Now, they found a lot of creative ways to get there, all right? They weren't just playing static Tampa 2. They were starting in 1 high and going into the 2 high safety structure. They would move people out of different positions, all right? They would kind of do these rotations to kind of keep Joe Burrow thinking post-snap, and that's really what they did, a lot of post-snap rotation. So whether they were playing Tampa or whether they were playing quarters or whether they were playing cover 1 or cover 3, they were rotating after the snap to make sure the quarterback, Joe Burrow, had to confirm post-snap where to throw the football and what the actual coverage was. And then also, they didn't blitz a whole lot in that game. Now, they did have a couple of blitzes that worked very well. They were very well-timed blitzes from the Steelers defensive coordinator, Teryl Austin, but there wasn't a whole lot of them. They got home with just 4 quite frequently, and that's what they got to do in this game, in my opinion, okay? I think you got to play a lot more zone coverage than what you did the last time against the Cincinnati Bengals. I think you got to double Jamar Chase and do a good job making sure that he doesn't get those quick slants and drags and all these different routes that he was getting big yardage on after the catch in their first matchup. And then, doing the post-snap rotation stuff, stymieing the run game, doing all those things that you did in that 2022 game. I think that it's a lesson that Teryl Austin should certainly learn, and I think that they'll do that. They've looked a lot better the last 2 weeks, all right, after, the embarrassing performances versus Cincinnati and Green Bay. Over the last 2 games, against Indy and against L.A., 2 quarterbacks that are playing pretty darn well, Daniel Jones and Justin Herbert. This defense looked a lot better. They were getting stops, all right? They were getting to the quarterback. This pass rush has been really good the last 2 weeks with just rushing 4. I think that, this defense has kind of turned over a new leaf since this team last played the Cincinnati Bengals. So I think, and it's my prediction, that this Steelers defense will play a lot better this week against the Bengals and Joe Flacco and Jamar Chase than they did back in Week 7. So who you got in this ball game? Let me know down there in the comment section. Type PIT for Pittsburgh or CIN for Cincinnati. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. For me, I'm taking the Pittsburgh Steelers to bounce back and win this one. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. Now, the last thing I want to talk about on today's show, guys, is that I do not think it is time to panic about Aaron Rodgers, okay? Because right now I'm seeing a lot on Steelers Twitter, this guy's going to be 42 years old in like 16 days, and he's so old, and he doesn't want to take hits, and, he's just not the same guy, and all this different stuff. We got to bench him for Mason Rudolph. I mean, that's just a bunch of BS to me, guys. I think that, quarterbacks are allowed to have, one bad game without being, called washed or too old or that he can't play anymore. Rodgers in those first 8 games was pretty darn good for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think that there is a reason to hope out there that Rodgers is going to be able to bounce back. The reason is, the other kind of older quarterback that went to a new team in his 40s and actually won a Super Bowl, Tom Brady, had a very comparable start to what Aaron Rodgers has done in the first half of his Steelers tenure. You guys can take a look at the first 9 games of Aaron Rodgers here in 2025 with the Steelers and Tom Brady with the Buccaneers back in 2020, and the numbers are very comparable. And the only reason why Brady has, almost 500 yards more than Aaron Rodgers is because he was throwing the ball a lot more than Rodgers is, all right? Their yards per attempt is actually very comparable. But, Rodgers and Brady right around the same in touchdowns, exactly the same in interceptions, right around the same in completion percentage. And that's just the surface level stats. But what I'm really interested in, guys, is the advanced stuff, the stuff that kind of goes, takes a peek behind the curtain and kind of shows us exactly how efficient these quarterbacks are playing. And you guys can see that these two quarterbacks are right around the same range in all of these key advanced metrics. All right, EPA per play, very similar. Success rates around the same rate. All right, and then the same rank in the National Football League. They both rank 16th at this point through their first 9 games with their new teams in completion percentage over expected. And then their passer ratings, very similar rankings as well. Aaron Rodgers was actually a little bit higher than Tom Brady's. And remember, Brady ended up going on to win the Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and defeating Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs at the height of their powers in order to do it. And, another thing that is very comparable between Rodgers and Brady is that in their 9th game, all right, it's kind of weird that it's the exact same game, but in their 9th game with their new teams was their worst game with those teams, all right? Tom Brady, you want to talk about looking old and looking like you can't play anymore, 0 touchdowns to 3 interceptions versus the New Orleans Saints, all right, just 5 yards per attempt and a quarterback rating of 40.4, all right? As bad as Aaron Rodgers was against the Los Angeles Chargers, at least he did throw a touchdown. One of his interceptions wasn't even his fault. It was on Calvin Austin III for dropping it, and his passer rating was 10 points higher than the GOATs in that particular scenario. And remember, sure, New Orleans had a good defense that year, but so do the Chargers, all right? These great level quarterbacks and, even the Hall of Famers, they can have bad games. And that's my message to Steelers Nation, is that one bad game does not mean that Aaron Rodgers is going to completely stink it up the rest of the way. And good QBs can have bad games. And, what makes these guys the best of the best and the best of all time is that they can bounce back from those bad games and play really well. And with the Steelers playing Cincinnati, a historically bad defense that's dead last in almost every single defensive category heading into the week, and then you get Chicago, another defense that's really struggling. The next 2 weeks, Aaron Rodgers could absolutely bounce back from that and get this offense back on the right track as we head down the home stretch of the 2025 season. So let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. What is your confidence level in Aaron Rodgers bouncing back this week versus the Cincinnati Bengals? Put it on a scale of 1, meaning he's going to be terrible this week, he's going to stink it up again, to 10, meaning he's just fine, he's going to play great, he's going to have one of his best performances of the year. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. That'll be it for today's edition of Steelers News and Rumors. We're going to have more Steelers coverage for you guys tomorrow leading up to our Week 11 game here versus the Cincinnati Bengals on Sunday afternoon. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Till next time, guys, here we go, Steelers. All right, first segment in the books here, Mr. Ponzi. And again, we will be doing a mailbag after our next segment. So if you guys have a question, if you disagree with me on something and you want to let me know, use hashtag Steelers down there in the live chat room. And if you want to make sure your question gets on the mailbag today, you can super chat any dollar amount along with your question, and we will make sure to get you on the show. I did see we got some super chats. Okay, we did get some super chats. No Venmos, though. So James with a 1. Appreciate you, James. Thanks for the $1 donation. Brian03 with a $2. Says, how does Khan keep getting away with wide receiver troubles? I think that teams just want too much for him. I really do. I think, and also, Omar was really close to getting both Jacoby Myers or Rashid Shaheed. They matched the prices that Jacksonville and Seattle ended up paying for those two guys. But apparently both of those teams said, okay, Jacoby, okay, Rashid, between the teams that have met our price tag here, which one do you want to go to? And both players decided not to go to the Steelers. And with Rashid Shaheed, I get it because he played with Clint Kubiak in New Orleans, and he played very well in his offense. And Seattle, is playing better than the Steelers are right now. I understand why Shaheed picked Seattle over Pittsburgh. But Jacoby, I think he picked Jacksonville because his old receiver coach from Las Vegas during the Josh McDaniels and Antonio Pierce era was in Jacksonville, so he wanted to go, play for his buddy in the wide receiver room there in Jacksonville. Also, no state income tax. Also, pretty similar caliber teams, Jacksonville and Pittsburgh at this point in the season. Plus the weather's better, right? So I kind of understand why Jacoby Myers went to Jacksonville. I really wish he would have chose Pittsburgh, obviously, but and then they were close to getting a Jaylen Waddle deal done, but then the Dolphins had cold feet at the last minute. So it's not because Omar wasn't trying. It's just I think they once again put their faith in Calvin Austin III to kind of emerge as this team's number 2 receiver. And for the most part this year, he just hasn't done that. I mean, Calvin only has 2 games this year where he's got over 50 receiving yards. So I don't think he has one game with over 100. So that's just been a big disappointment this year, man. It really has. And unless somebody else steps up like an MVS or Roman Wilson or maybe Pat Freiermuth can step up here, and there's just not a whole lot of other receiving options other than DK Metcalf. So we'll see, man. We'll see what Khan is able to do next offseason. But I mean, the guys we got now are pretty much the guys we're gonna have for the rest of the way. $5 from Ali says, since everyone wants Tomlin gone, who is the best fitting coach to coach the Steelers to the Super Bowl? Well, for me, Ali, I haven't done like extensive search or anything like that, but like when I look at head coach candidates, the guy that I continuously go back to for the Steelers that would make sense is Brian Flores from the Minnesota Vikings. He already has built-in respect and buy-in from the Steelers locker room because he coached here, and Cam Hayward and T.J. Watt and all these guys, they know what Coach Flo is about, and they respect the hell out of him. Also, he can command a locker room. He really can. He is a big-time dynamic personality, and I think that's important for somebody that's going to be taking over for Mike Tomlin, who might be one of the most charismatic leaders in all of sports. I mean, players that play for him absolutely swear by him, and it's because of the leadership that he does provide to the Steelers locker room. So the person coming in is going to have to match that level of energy and ability to command a room. Then also, he's a brilliant defensive mind, so you'd be getting one of the better defensive minds in the entire sport to run the Steelers defense. And then he also has connections to the Kevin O'Connell / Sean McVay wing of the West Coast offense, which is obviously very, very successful. And maybe even Josh McCown would come over and be this team's OC. Maybe there's another hot shot there in Minnesota that Brian Flores would bring over that we don't know about yet. I just feel like that checks all my boxes for who I would want to replace Mike Tomlin with. But, I'm certainly open to Coach T returning if this team makes the playoffs again and, wins a playoff game and does some good stuff. I'm certainly okay with Tomlin staying, and I certainly think that's the most likely scenario at this point. I would say maybe over a 90% chance Tomlin is back with this team next year is probably what I'd say at this point. $5 from Justin Yankuski says, do you think A-Rod or Tomlin was behind staying in the Chargers game in garbage time when he could have gotten really hurt? I mean, I think Rodgers probably wanted to play. I think that, there wasn't like a big discussion. I think it was just that, he's our starting quarterback. He's going to go out there. I think that was the extent of the decision, and I don't think Rodgers had a problem being out there. That's for sure, Justin. Okay, man, we got one more segment to go here, or two more. We got our second dose of Steelers news and rumors. We're going to be talking about the rumor that Mike Tomlin might be traded to the Giants. I'll let you guys know my thoughts on that. But then we also have our mailbag coming up. So again, guys, hashtag Steelers in the live chat room or super chat to get on the mailbag this week. Without further ado, let's get into our second dose of Steelers news and rumors right now. Could Mike Tomlin be on his way to the New York Football Giants after this season? There's certainly a lot of rumors connecting Coach T to the Big Apple. I'll let you guys know my thoughts on that possibility at the top of today's edition of Steelers Talk. Then there's been a lot of talk and discussion surrounding Jaylen Warren's usage in the Steelers offense, especially after he got less than 50% of the snaps versus the Los Angeles Chargers. We'll talk about that later in today's show. And then we'll finish up today's program with a report from Mark Caboli where he reveals why the Steelers traded George Pickens for a third-round pick this offseason. So if you don't know what the answer to that question is, make sure you guys stick around. But before we get into the content today, make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already. All of our content, whether it's our live watch parties for every single Steelers game, to our 2 videos that we put out for free on this channel every single day, to our breaking news coverage, all of it is 100% free of charge for Steelers fans to enjoy. We currently have the largest individually run Steelers channel anywhere here on YouTube with over 103,000 subscribers. And the reason why we've grown our subscriber base that much is because we provide you guys free, informative, and entertaining Steelers videos, at least 2 a day on this channel. We go live every time there's a big move made by the con artist. And we also have weekly watch parties and live shows where we talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers with our very large Steelers fan community here on YouTube. So make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already, if you want extensive Steelers coverage 24/7, 365. All right, so now let's get into, really a huge rumor that has been circulating throughout the week, which is that multiple people in the media and multiple outlets are now connecting Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin to the New York Giants head coaching vacancy. Of course, the Giants fired Brian Daboll this week, and there's been a lot of rumors circulating about which guys they could be targeting, and Mike Tomlin has been one of the most heavily brought up names in that discussion this week. Now, I will say this, okay? I do think a Mike Tomlin trade is pretty unlikely. And I know that there's a lot of people in this fan base that want to see him gone, want to see him fired, all that stuff, but I think that not 1, not 2, but 3 steps need to be done in order for any Mike Tomlin trade to potentially become reality. The first step is that Pittsburgh wants to start a rebuild in 2026, okay? And I think that the way that Pittsburgh is going to be willing to abandon their kind of win-now philosophy and strategy that they're currently adopting is if essentially things go to hell for the rest of this season. They win less than 10 games and they miss the playoffs, all right? And that's still very possible at this point in time. You're sitting at 5-4. If the offense doesn't get better, if the defense continues to be inconsistent, all that stuff, if that stuff continues and you finish with less than 10 wins and you miss the playoffs, then certainly Art Rooney and Omar Khan might want to fully embrace a rebuild and maybe take a step backwards in team development and get some more draft picks, trade some veterans away so that they can inject this team with more young talent and start over potentially with a new head coach. Now, the second step that needs to happen is that teams in the National Football League would need to be willing to pay up for Tomlin, all right? And for Tomlin, he's a future Hall of Fame head coach. So I think, when we see guys like Jon Gruden, who is not going to be an NFL Hall of Famer, Sean Payton, who probably will be, but, he isn't yet, get traded for first-round picks, the Steelers are going to want a first-round pick, at least, in exchange for Mike Tomlin. And these first 2 steps, honestly, guys, I think that teams would be willing to do that because there's a lot of teams out there that crave the amount of stability that Mike Tomlin has brought to the Steelers over the course of nearly 2 decades here in Pittsburgh. And listen, man, if teams are offering a first-round pick or if they're offering a first-round pick and more, that would certainly be enticing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But this is the most important step here, guys. Step number 3, and I think it's the least likely to be able to be executed, which is that Mike Tomlin has to agree to go to a different team. Because I don't know if a lot of people know this, but he does have a no-trade clause in his contract. So he's going to have to agree to go to whatever team he gets traded to, okay? And, I'm just not really sure that he would want to go to especially a New York Giants team that is still rebuilding, all right? They did just draft a quarterback, but it was a quarterback that Mike Tomlin passed on this year. Does he really want Jackson Dart to be his franchise quarterback? And then with the rest of the team, the offensive line is not very good. They got Malik Neighbors, but they don't have a ton of other weapons outside of Cam Scatterbo. And then on defense, they got a good pass rush, but they certainly are bereft of talent both at linebacker and in the secondary at this point in time. So does Mike Tomlin really want to go from the Steelers situation where he's been here for nearly 2 decades, his family lives here, all that stuff? Does he really want to uproot his life to go to the Big Apple and go to East Rutherford there and, completely rebuild the Giants? I think he'd rather just stay here and rebuild the Steelers. So I think if Tomlin agrees to get traded somewhere else, it has to be with a good team. Like, it would have to be like if the Cowboys wanted to part ways with Brian Schottenheimer at the end of the season and they wanted to trade but I don't even think they have draft capital to go get Mike Tomlin at this point, right? It would have to be, a team with an established veteran, maybe even star quarterback with a decent roster that can win now. And I just don't see a lot of teams firing their head coaches with those situations. So unless the perfect situation comes up where Tomlin would agree to leave the Steelers for a winning program, I just don't see him waiving his no-trade clause for anybody, and I just don't see the Steelers terminating Mike Tomlin because they don't want to pay the remaining money on his contract, which is very, very hefty. And, because of that, I would say, a Tomlin trade this offseason probably has a less than 5% chance of happening. All right, I think that the Steelers are very proud of the fact that they've only had 3 head coaches, since the Super Bowl era started, all this different stuff. And if the coach is not going to be willing to be traded anywhere, then I don't think they're going to terminate him. So I would say at this point, probably over a 90% chance Mike Tomlin returns as the Pittsburgh Steelers head coach in 2026. So what say you guys? Let me know down there in the comment section. What is the percent chance that Mike Tomlin gets traded next offseason? Put it on a scale of 0 to 100 for me down there in the comment section. 0 meaning no chance he gets traded, to 100 meaning he's definitely getting traded. Let me know what you guys think for today's pinned question. In just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today at Prize Picks. While I tell you about Prize Picks, let me know your answer to this question down there in the comment section. And with that, let's have a word from our sponsor today at Prize Picks. And the hard-hitting football action this season is just getting started, and it's even better with our friends at Prize Picks. The weather might be changing outside, but the feeling of being right never gets old. So keep the season rolling on with Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. Prize Picks is super simple to play. Just pick more than or less than on at least 2-player stat projections, and if you get your picks right, you could cash in. On Prize Picks, how you play is up to you. If you want flexibility, choose the flex play, where you can get paid even if one of your picks misses. And if you want the biggest payouts, go for the power play. No matter how you play, though, Prize Picks is a great way to put your takes to the test. Join millions of users and sign up for America's #1 fantasy sports app. And you guys can check out my Prize Picks lineup for this weekend's matchup versus the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm taking the more on passing yards for Aaron Rodgers, the more on rushing yards for Jaylen Warren, and the less on passing yards for Joe Flacco. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. So now let's shift our focus here to Jaylen Warren, where it's certainly been a big talking point this week on Steelers Twitter. Jaylen Warren hasn't been on the field and hasn't been getting enough touches this season, and it's because of coaching malpractice why that's the case. Now, the thing that kind of spurred this discussion is that during the Los Angeles Charger game last week, Kenneth Gainwell actually had the most amount of snaps, and Jaylen Warren only had 24 compared to Gainwell's 27, and people saw that number, and they're saying, why is our best offensive player not getting at least 50%, if not more, of the offensive snaps when it comes to the running backs? Now, I will say some proper context here that you guys should be aware of is that Gainwell played pretty much exclusively at running back during garbage time. When the game was out of hand for the Steelers, kind of midway through the fourth quarter, it was pretty much all Gainwell out there. And honestly, I agree with that decision from the Pittsburgh Steelers. If the game is in hand and the game is over, why would we trot out our best offensive player for a chance to get injured, right? So keep Jaylen Warren's legs fresh. I like that idea from Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith to save Jaylen Warren's legs for later in the season because the game was pretty much in hand at that point. And then, you look at the breakdown of the snaps between the running backs throughout the entire season, excluding week 4 versus the Vikings because Warren was out that game. But, in all these other weeks, Jaylen Warren very clearly has the most snaps. Kenneth Gainwell does get out there, but, he is certainly he's been a good number 2 back for the most part. I think he hasn't played quite as well the last 2 weeks, but for, the majority of the season, Kenny Gainwell has been a pretty darn good number 2 running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then Caleb Johnson has been getting more and more as the season has gone on, but just 24 snaps in the games that we're talking about there. But listen, man, it's not like the Steelers didn't get the ball to Jaylen Warren, all right? He got the ball 16 times on 24 of his snaps. That's 2/3 of the snaps where he was on the field, he was getting the football. So when he was out there, the priority was get the ball in the hands of number 30. And he also had, he had 50% of the touches on the entire team. All right, to Mike Tomlin's point, there just wasn't a whole lot of touches to go around, and that's why Jaylen didn't get to the 20-plus that he probably should get in a normal football game. But because the Steelers were consistently going 3 and out, they just didn't have a whole lot of offensive plays Like, it just limited the amount of touches to go around. And Jaylen Warren himself had 16 touches. Everybody else on the offense only had 16. So he had half of the total touches of the entire offense last week. So certainly the Steelers are prioritizing getting the ball to Jaylen Warren. But I can hear you guys saying at home, but Jack, they're not playing him on third down enough. And I hear you guys. All right, I'm open to that discussion. I am open to the discussion of using Jaylen Warren more on third downs. He's an excellent receiving back. Obviously, if teams want to sag back and, leave Jaylen Warren wide open, you can just get it out to him. He usually makes a guy miss, and he could pick up a first down on just a check down, right? He's one of the more dangerous third down backs in the league. But I also think, it's worth mentioning that if he plays more on third down, then you're going to have somebody else come in on early downs. And are you willing to sacrifice Jaylen Warren's production on early downs and his snaps on early downs in order to put him out there on third down? And, I think that certainly you could put him out there for a couple more third downs than he did against the Chargers, all right? But, I think that something that could be a part of this discussion is, could we see Caleb Johnson get some more playing time on early downs? Because I don't think Kenny Gainwell is an early down back. He's just too slight. But this might be a really good opportunity to start increasing the workload of Caleb Johnson, who honestly has looked pretty good in the time that he has had over especially the last 2 weeks. And if you give him some more of that workload on early downs, that's going to open up more opportunities for Jaylen Warren, who is an excellent third down back, by the way, to be more of a third down back for you. And I think that would be a good game plan. And I think that that's something that the Steelers will certainly consider as the season goes on. But, I think people are focusing on the wrong issue here, okay? Like, people keep honing in on Warren not getting enough snaps, Warren not getting enough snaps. That's not the issue to me, guys. The issue with me is that nobody else is capable of stepping up in the Steelers offense other than Jaylen Warren and DK Metcalf on occasion, right? Calvin Austin III only has 2 games this year with over 50 yards receiving. All right, Roman Wilson only has 1. Pat Freiermuth only has 1. Darnell Washington only has 1. It's only happened 6 times this season, guys, where a player outside of DK Metcalf has gotten more than 50 receiving yards, okay? So for me, if Jaylen Warren's not on the field, but, we make a successful play over to Calvin Austin III, or if Pat Freiermuth is getting the football, or DK Metcalf catches a touchdown, nobody gives a shit if Jaylen Warren's not on the field for that play. The reason why people are noticing Jaylen Warren is not on the field is because the Steelers' offense is failing. So they have to find other players that can step up in this offense to be able to kind of alleviate the load that Jaylen Warren has been taking throughout the course of this season. And frankly, DK Metcalf has been taking on this season. I think that is the main issue that we should be focusing on at this point, because Jaylen Warren is a really freaking good player, and I'm all for playing him more. But, at the end of the day, this is the NFL, and you do have to split reps with the rest of the backs in your room. So let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. Do you think the Steelers offense will bounce back this year? Give me a yes or a no down there in the comments section. I can see arguments for both of these, so let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. We'll finish up today's edition of Steelers News and Rumors by talking about a new report from Mark Kaboly here from the Pat McAfee Show, who claims that the Steelers were, and Steelers players, it wasn't the coaches or the front office, it was the players that were quote-unquote done with George Pickens, leading to his trade this offseason. Now, Kaboly put out a very extensive tweet breaking down all the different points of his report here, so we're going to go one by one here. This is what Kaboly had to say. More on the Steelers trading George Pickens to Dallas. Significant locker room guys got fed up with Pickens' antics and quickly got turned off by him for multiple reasons, I was told. Another point, some felt it would be counterproductive to keep him around. Even with his unique talent, they felt the locker room could turn toxic with him inside of it. Not many teams were interested in trading for Pickens, making it difficult for the Steelers to get market value. The Steelers wouldn't have traded him for anything less than a third-round pick, something that was not offered until the draft. Not many were broken up. Well, not many in the Steelers locker room were broken up within the organization that Pickens got traded. And then just recently here, this is what Kaboly had to say about the situation. I think the Pickens trade needed to be done. I think it was getting really ugly behind the scenes there. And I think some of the players of veteran leadership weren't too thrilled with George. So I think that pushed it to the edge. And I think a lot of the players were finally fed up with him, and the right players were fed up with him. So certainly interesting comments there from Mark Kaboly. And I think, something that's really easy to say as a fan, somebody that never, was a part of the Steelers organization, had to deal with George Pickens being late to meetings and all of his antics on the field and off of it. I think it's easy to say we should have kept him. And frankly, man, I was one of those people. This offseason, I was like, man, yeah, DK Metcalf and George Pickens, keep these two guys. It would be so much fun. And as a fan, it would have been fun, right? Seeing those two super talented players on the same offense, and now especially because the wide receiver room here in Pittsburgh has not been up to snuff outside of DK Metcalf this year. It's so easy to say in hindsight that we should have kept George Pickens. But listen, man, we weren't the ones that had to deal with him on a day-to-day basis. Like, this isn't Madden, okay? These players don't just, pick up a controller and play their positions, on the TV, right? They actually have to deal with each other as human beings every single day. And it sounded like not only front office people, not only coaches, but also the players. TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, the leaders of this team were thinking that keeping George Pickens would have been toxic to the team. So I'm going to defer to them, because obviously they know more about the situation than I do. We're not a part of the Steelers locker room. And would it have been super fun to make it work between DK Metcalf and George Pickens here in Pittsburgh? Absolutely. But you think George Pickens would be happy in the Steelers offense right now, getting like 3 or 4 targets a game? I don't think so, man. I think it would have been a very, very explosive situation. And at the end of the day, we got an extra draft pick by trading him away. And the best that we can hope for at this point, guys, and now that everything is come and gone, is that someone else needs to step up. Whether that's Roman Wilson, who's shown some really good flashes over the last month and a half or so. Whether that's Calvin Austin III. Whether that's Pat Freiermuth getting more time. There's no reason why he shouldn't be playing more over Jonnu Smith, who's been terrible all season long. Right? There are potential solutions here in Pittsburgh, but nobody else was making plays against the Chargers last week, and frankly, they haven't been making a ton of plays throughout the entire season. It's mostly been Jaylen Warren, DK Metcalf, and that's it for the entire season to this point. There's been little flashes from these other guys, but we need more consistency from the supplementary and secondary pieces of this Steelers offense. And if it doesn't come, I'm not sure. It certainly puts a ceiling on what this Steelers offense can be down the stretch. So what say you guys? Let me know down there in the comments section. Was the George Pickens trade a mistake? Type G if you think it was a good move, or type M if you think it was a big mistake. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. And that'll be it for today's edition of Steelers News and Rumors. Thank you guys so much for stopping by here today. We'll have more coverage for you guys, getting you ready for Sunday's matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals. So until next time, guys, here we go, Steelers. All right, we got one more segment to get to here, which is our mailbag. Ponzi's telling me we have enough questions. Did we get any more Super Chats during that? Okay, cool. All right, well, let's get right into it, man. I'm not going to make you guys wait any longer. We still got over 500 people watching live here on Steelers Talk. It's my favorite segment of the week, the Steelers Talk mailbag. I'm sure you guys brought plenty of great questions here this week. Can't wait to discuss it. Looking forward to it here, guys. Corey says, yo, Jack, let your boy know what the name of the instrumental you used in the beginning. I honestly don't know, Corey. Like, I don't choose that stuff, honestly. We have a whole team here at Chat Sports that picks it, but I like it too. But what's that?
Ours is my favorite.
Yeah, I love ours too. I think ours is the best out of any channel here at Chat Sports. That's just my personal opinion. But, I don't even know what the name of it is. I wish I could tell you, but, that was I like this point made by Justin, by the way. Can we hit this from Justin before we get into it? I like this point from Justin. And listen, man, the more time that goes on this season, the more I agree with him. And, me and Justin, certainly, I was somebody that was willing to give like Calvin and Roman a shot this year. He was kind of always on the, these guys aren't up to snuff kind of, take there. And, the more weeks that go on, the more right he looks and the more wrong I look. He said 14 had to go. Not replacing him was a bad mistake. Yeah, man. It was very obvious, once they got rid of George that they felt that Calvin was good enough, and they felt like Roman was going to be good enough, and they felt like Jonnu was going to be a big part of this offense this year. Jonnu has been a disaster. I mean, you pay him top 10 tight end money And let's just see what he's done this year. It hasn't been much. I think he only has 2 touchdowns. Let me see here. All right. So he's only had 36 targets. He's had 26 catches for only 163 yards. 163 yards. He's getting less than 20 yards a game. And Mike Tomlin was talking about him like he was going to be this team's number 2 receiver this year. He has 2 touchdowns on the year. I mean, that's just not good enough, folks. It's just not good enough. He's got 4.5 yards per target. That is a fucking joke. A fucking joke. And I'm pretty sure he's out-snapping Pat Freiermuth this year. Are you fucking kidding me? Excuse my language. But, like, there's no reason why Jonnu Smith should be out-snapping Pat Freiermuth. No reason. Pat's actually a good player. He's got good hands. All right, he can actually run some routes and get open sometimes. He's got excellent zone IQ and knows which soft spots he should sit down in. He knows how to run proper seams. Jonnu Smith doesn't do any of that shit. All right, Jonnu just catches the ball and runs forward. That's all he can really do. And he gets more snaps than Pat Freiermuth. I mean, I know he's Arthur Smith's guy, but it's like, at this point, I'm not even convinced Pat Freiermuth's not the second best receiver on the team. And that's a scary thought, man. Unless Calvin or Roman or MVS steps up, I mean, until they prove otherwise, I have to agree with Justin that this has been a failure on the part of Omar Khan to not find a suitable replacement for George Pickens in this offense. And that sucks. $5. Drew Ringler says, for how bad he played, I don't think he will bounce back now. Don't get me wrong. I'm a diehard Steelers fan, but I don't have faith anymore. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Andrew. But I'll say this, man. This time last week, people were talking about Aaron Rodgers playing so well for the Steelers and how we got to bring him back for another season and all this stuff. One bad game should not change, the narrative or the opinion. Okay, bad games happen. It's a week-to-week league, especially when you play really good defenses like the Chargers. You can have off nights, and that's what happened with Aaron Rodgers. Does that mean he's going to play that way the rest of the season? No, all right? And I've talked about this on the show quite a bit, Ponzi, the hot hand fallacy or the cold hand fallacy, whatever way you go about it. People think that whatever's happening now or whatever happened most recently is going to continue in the future. Well, that's not always the case, all right? And, this has been a well-documented phenomena in sports betting markets and all this different stuff where, like, if a player is really hot from 3, they're going to bet that the next 3-pointer they shoot is going to go in, and they lose a lot of money on it, right? Because, on coin flips, like if you do coin flips and you have 3 heads in a row, people are going to bet that it lands on heads again because it's happened 3 times in a row. And because what's happening now is what's going to continue in the future, all right? This is just the way human people tend to think, all right? But, like, you look at the National Football League, man, it's a week-to-week league, and things change. And, like, what has the average performance from Aaron Rodgers looked like? It hasn't looked like amazing. It's not like MVP caliber prime Rodgers, but it's, like, pretty darn good. Like, it's not bad. I think he's, like, 5th or 6th in touchdown passes in the entire league right now. And that is with the receiver woes that we've been discussing on today's show. So, like, all I'm saying is that I want to see more bad performances from Rodgers against bad defenses. If he stinks it up against Cincinnati this week, if he stinks it up against Chicago again, and that's like 3 straight really bad performances from him, then okay, we can talk about his body deteriorating, all that different stuff, and we can think about, next steps. But, after one bad game to talk about Rodgers in the way that we're talking about him, I think is just a complete overreaction, being a prisoner of the moment, and I'm hoping that, what we saw last week was just an aberration and just a bad game that he's going to get over. I guess we'll see. $2 from Justin says, look at the total production from all the tight ends. It's sad. Yeah, man. I will say, I think Darnell Washington has been, the riser in the group. And I think the inclusion of Spencer Anderson as a tight end and jumbo personnel looks have been awesome for this team. But this team continues to use Jonnu Smith as the primary receiving tight end, And there's just no way in hell that should be the case. It should be Pat Freiermuth that's getting those looks and, getting those responsibilities. It's just ridiculous that Jonnu is getting those because he's just terrible. I mean, let's just look at Pat Freiermuth's production this year, shall we? I guarantee you it's better than Jonnu's, even though he's playing less than him right now. Let's take a look what Pat's doing. All right, it's not like Pat's having like a great season either because he's not really playing. All right, he's got 22 catches, so almost the same amount as Jonnu, and Jonnu just gets like manufactured touches. I believe he has more yards than him. He does, 260 yards. All right, his yards per reception is over a first down a catch, and he has more touchdowns than Jonnu on significantly less snaps. He's got about 10 more yards per game than Jonnu on less snaps as well, which is just ridiculous. Why do we insist on playing Jonnu Smith? It doesn't make sense to me. I don't know, man. I think if you played Pat more, the production from the tight ends would be a lot better. $5 from Calculated Snipe says, I feel like Arthur Smith is more dedicated to what he thinks will work than who can actually ball and make the catches, sticking with the plan a little too hard. I don't disagree with that, Calculated Snipe. Now, I will say he did go against the quote-unquote plan earlier on in the season by implementing the jumbo personnel packages. Because remember, the first 3 weeks of the season, outside of the Jet game, the offense wasn't looking good. You couldn't run the football. It wasn't looking good because you had Jonnu Smith and Pat Freiermuth out there as the tight ends instead of Darnell Washington and Spencer Anderson. And once they made that shift to get the bigger bodies out there, the run game got going, and that opened up the downfield passing game a little bit more. And the offense looked a lot better there for multiple weeks. And, then you have the performance last week, and it looks like everything comes undone. But I'm with you on the fact that he continues to play Jonnu Smith, like his most favorite son for some reason. And he's just not good at football. He's not. He's not that good. He should be this team's tight end 4. He should be getting the 4th most snaps. Spencer Anderson should be out-snapping Jonnu Smith at this point in time. And I'm 100% serious about that. Just a waste of money. Waste of money on Jonnu Smith. $5 from Andrew Ringler says, I hope you're right because I hate when Pittsburgh loses. We all hate when they lose, man. But, that doesn't mean we have to – just because we hate losing doesn't mean we should overreact when they lose. You know what I'm saying? I feel like, sometimes when they lose, you should just, accept that sometimes bad games are going to happen in this league. And it happens to everybody. It happens to Mahomes, and it happens to Andy Reid, and it happened to Tom Brady, and all the great players. It happened to Josh Allen last week. He played an absolute stinker against a bad Dolphins defense last week. The Dolphins defense stinks, and he was terrible last week. Should the Bills bench him for Mitchell Trubisky? No, right? Like it's just bad games. Sometimes happen, and I think the right way to look at it, Andrew, is that once you get multiple bad games in a row, then you can start talking about, there being a problem. But, like, if there's just one bad game, I think that's a little bit too early to be talking about having no hope or all this different stuff that you alluded to earlier. All right, man. Well, let's get into the questions here. All right, man. We got our mailbag. We still got over 400 people watching live. I appreciate your guys' support. What's that, Ponzi? Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, let's do it. Let's get into our mailbag here. Week 11 mailbag coming at you guys right now. It's my favorite segment of the week. It is the Steelers Talk mailbag here in Week 11, where I'm answering your questions on the black and gold as this team prepares to take on the Cincinnati Bengals here in Week 11 at home. Now, before we get into the questions today, make sure you click that subscribe button to join the most interactive Steelers community anywhere here on YouTube. We got over 103,000 Yinzers already subscribed to the channel that bleed black and gold, and we go live every single Tuesday and Thursday to talk Steelers football with each other, and then also we go live for every single Steelers game for pregame, during the game, and post-game coverage. We have the largest Steelers watch parties anywhere on the YouTube platform. We do these mailbags every single week so that you guys can get your questions on the show and we can have that two-way conversation. I greatly appreciate all the support that you give to me and Ponzi here on Steelers Talk. So click that subscribe button if you haven't already to help us get to 105,000 subscribers as soon as we possibly can. $10 from Alex L. says, if Rodgers wets the bed again, do we bench him during the game? I mean, it depends on how bad it is. Like, if he's just, like, not completing any passes and it's, like, really bad, then, yeah, maybe you think about it. But I got to see at least a couple of bad performances in a row, Alex, before I start thinking about taking Rodgers out. Because taking Rodgers out essentially means you're waving the towel on the season. All right, you're saying we have no shot the rest of the way because Mason Rudolph isn't going to get you there. All right, Will Howard, a rookie, is not going to get you there. Maybe Will performs well, but like even in the best case scenario, Mason Rudolph and Will Howard do not get you to a championship, whereas Rodgers, who has been there, he's done that, longtime veteran, big-time talent, could still theoretically get you in that position if the rest of the team kind of comes together. But if you bench Rodgers, you're essentially saying this season's done, we're throwing in the towel. And I just don't think the Steelers are going to do that until, the season essentially is lost. So I think it's going to take at least a couple more games where the team is really playing poorly. They're losing every single game, and essentially the season is over before they end up benching Aaron Rodgers. $2 from Justin says, appreciate the friendly debate, Sperry. 88 is better than 81. Couldn't agree more, man. And certainly it looks like you're probably getting the best of me on the wide receiver debate, because I went into the year and I'm like, man, I saw Calvin get open a lot on film last year, and I thought, with Rodgers coming in, he's going to be able to see him more. And sure, Calvin's been injured at times, but like Calvin's only had 2 games above 50 yards receiving this year, and it's just like at some point we got to see him produce. I think he's got the talent, he's got the ability, he's got some really cool traits about him and about his game, but he's been less productive than he was last year with Russell Wilson. So, and then certainly with the Pat Freiermuth and Jonnu Smith debate, Pat Freiermuth, no reason why Jonnu Smith should be playing more than him. It just makes no sense to me. I mean, Pat Freiermuth, he's not getting as many snaps as Jonnu, yet he's outproducing him in pretty much every single category. And Arthur Smith, being the ultimate Jonnu Smith guy, just keeps putting him out there and keeps benching Pat Freiermuth. And it just makes no sense to me. So I'm right there with you, Justin. I appreciate you too, my friend. True or false? Let me know down there in the comment section. Jonnu Smith should be getting the least amount of tight end snaps. Well, I mean, outside of Connor Hayward, all right? Between Darnell Washington, Pat Freiermuth, and Jonnu Smith, is it true or false that Jonnu Smith should be getting the least amount of snaps? Type T for true or type F for false. This will be the pinned comment on today's show. YouTube's going to throw you an ad break here in just a couple of seconds. When that happens, take advantage of that time. But letting me know true or false down there in the comments. $5 from Justin says, do you think A-Rod or Tomlin was behind staying in the Charger game in garbage time when he could have gotten really hurt? I think it was probably, Tomlin, but I don't think there was like a discussion that was had, right? I probably, during garbage time, I probably would have thrown in Mason Rudolph just to keep Rodgers healthy, but kind of like what they did with Jaylen Warren. Like, they didn't play Jaylen Warren the rest of the game once it got to garbage time because they wanted to keep him healthy and fresh, but I guess they didn't feel the need to do that with Rodgers, so I don't think there was really like a discussion about, hey, you want to stay in or not? It was more of just like, he's our starting quarterback, so he's going to go out there. $5 from Ali the Reaper says, since everyone wants Tomlin gone, who is the best fitting coach to coach the Steelers to the Super Bowl? I think that I will say this, the chances of firing Tomlin and trading Tomlin, extremely low. All right, Tomlin has a no-trade clause, so if he's going to get traded, he has to agree to go somewhere else, and I just don't see him doing that. And in terms of firing him, he still has multiple years left on his deal, and I just don't see the Steelers paying the amount of money they would have to pay to Tomlin to go away. All right, so I think that barring some unforeseen disaster, Mike Tomlin will probably be back with the Pittsburgh Steelers next year, whether you like that or not as a fan. By the way, the coach that I would probably want to replace him with would be Brian Flores. I think that he checks all the boxes for me. He already has established credibility in the locker room. He was a coach here in Pittsburgh, so players know what he's about. And he has the support of the leadership. Then also brilliant defensive mind. He'd be bringing that on day one. And then also he'd be bringing over a pretty good offensive mind because he's got a connection to the Kevin O'Connell and Sean McVay tree. So I think that is certainly something that I would be interested in. Plus, he's charismatic as hell. He's learned how to be a player-friendly coach from guys like Tomlin and Kevin O'Connell, whereas back in Miami, he was still doing a Belichick-style, dictatorship-style, head coaching philosophy. So I think Brian Flores deserves another chance to be a head coach in the National Football League, and if Tomlin ends up getting traded, I think Flores would be my pick. All right, now let's give you guys an awesome opportunity to get an awesome piece of Steelers apparel. It is the Salute to Service officially licensed Steelers sweatshirt. When you go chatsports.com/PitSalute25. Really like the Army green coloring this year. You got the Steelers logo there on the chest patch. Then you got the American flag branding there on the right sleeve. I think you can wear this in a bunch of different occasions and different settings. Usually in the past, the Salute to Service gear was super heavy on the camo, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with camo. But I think that, just a plain, minimalistic Army green, I think is a really good look. So if you agree with me on that, you want to get this for yourself or somebody that you love for Christmas, go to chatsports.com/PitSalute25. And also, every time you click our link and make a purchase, we get part of the proceeds back here at Steelers Talk, so you're supporting the channel as well. So if you guys want this sweatshirt, chatsports.com/PitSalute25. That link is down in the comments and description of today's show if you want to get this thing in your closet today. $2 from Brian03 says, how does Khan keep getting away with wide receiver troubles? I think that, it's the Steelers' opinion that wide receiver talent is cheap in this league. And there's a lot of different, you can get a good wide receiver in the draft in the middle rounds nowadays, for example. There's usually plenty of them that are available via trade. There's usually plenty of them that are available via free agency. And I think teams that are trading receiver talent away are asking for a lot. And the teams trying to acquire wide receiver talent, like the Steelers, are not trying to pay too much to get one. And I think that Khan was willing to pony up. I mean, according to the reports, he was willing to pay exactly what Jacksonville and Seattle paid for Jacoby Myers and Rashid Shaheed, respectively. It's just that the players decided to go elsewhere when the teams gave them a choice of where they were going. So hopefully they can figure it out. And hopefully someone else can step up here, whether that's Roman Wilson, Calvin Austin III, Pat Freiermuth, MVS. Hopefully somebody can step up because, until somebody else does, the double teams are going to be coming for DK Metcalf. $5 from Steelers fan 151 says, what's your opinion on getting a corner first round over a QB? I want to see what happens with Asante Samuel Jr. for sure, man. Asante's only 26, so if he plays well this year, there's a chance that they could bring him back in free agency next year. And I think that if that's the case, there's certainly bigger needs that the Steelers have on their roster that they could address. They could address offensive guard because Sayamalo's a free agent next year. I think that they could certainly go quarterback. They could go wide receiver like we talked about earlier. Maybe even safety. But, there's certainly other positions that they could go with as well. But I'll say this, man. I'm open to anything at this point. I want to see how the season plays out. I want to see how free agency plays out, obviously. And then we can kind of have a good idea of what the Steelers are thinking with their first round selection this year. So make sure you guys click that thumbs up icon if you haven't already. If you are a real one, if you love the Pittsburgh Steelers, you love this channel, you appreciate the work that we put in for you guys every single day to get you guys 2 Steelers videos for free on this channel every day. The best way you guys can say thank you is just click that thumbs up icon. It really does help out our channel. All right, so now next question from Bernard says, is Tomlin mad at Aaron Rodgers? No, he's not mad at Aaron Rodgers, man. He's obviously disappointed that he didn't play well last week, but, that's the way you want your coach to respond. And by the way, Rodgers would tell you that he's probably pretty upset with how he played last week. So, there's no bad blood between Mike Tomlin and Aaron Rodgers because of the way Aaron played last week, Bernard. $5 from Andrew says, why do they give more snaps to Jonnu Smith than Pat Freiermuth? Well, it's because Arthur Smith loves him. All right, that's why they wanted him in a trade when they ended up trying to get him. And then, of course, they packaged Jalen Ramsey in the deal to get him as well. But Jonnu Smith is somebody that's been known as kind of like a good yak threat throughout his career. And I think that Arthur Smith and Aaron Rodgers were kind of thinking like, we got to get the ball out of Aaron's hands because he doesn't move very well. So we got to get the ball out fast. A good way to get the ball out fast is to get it to a designated kind of touch, kind of yak threat. And they thought Jonnu Smith was going to provide them a competitive advantage in that regard. But he doesn't block, which is kind of weird because Arthur Smith usually likes guys that block, and Jonnu Smith doesn't do shit in the blocking game. And then he doesn't run good routes. He doesn't have particularly good hands. And he's not the same yak threat that he was last year in Miami when he had a career year. So he's just been a massive disappointment. They drastically overpaid for him. I thought the Steelers I think the Steelers probably thought he was going to be able to be as productive as a number 2 receiver is in this offense, and he has less than 200 yards more than halfway through the season, which is just embarrassing. So my thinking is play Pat Freiermuth more. He's been way more productive, way more efficient. He's just a better player than Jonnu Smith is at this point, and I'd pretty much bench Jonnu Smith at this point in this season. So let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. Will the Steelers win the AFC North this year? Simply give me a yes or a no down there in the comment section. The betting market certainly favors the Ravens, but at least for me personally, guys, I'm still keeping hope that the Pittsburgh Steelers can win the division this season. All right, man, that'll be it for this week's edition of the Steelers Talk Mailbag. Thank you for everybody that submitted questions this week. Of course, we'll be going live for our game versus the Cincinnati Bengals on Sunday afternoon. That all starts at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already for our live coverage of Steelers versus Bengals. Got some more super chats to hit here before we say goodbye for the day. JV Free says today is peak dumb Rodgers takes in the chat. Listen, man, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. Yeah. I want to make that abundantly clear. But I personally, I'm not panicking. All right, I think we've discussed it. The hot hand fallacy. Whatever's happening now, people think is going to keep happening in the future. And it's like, that's just not always the case. Like, people thought after the Bengal game back in week 7 when he had, 4 touchdowns and, completely lit up the scoreboard that he was, like, awesome, right?
He was the MVP.
We got questions after that game about him winning league MVP. It's just the way human nature works. If somebody plays well one week, they think they think that player is going to continue to play that way forever. All right, and if somebody plays bad, like Aaron Rodgers did last week, they think that that's going to continue into the future. And who knows, it might. It very well might be that Rodgers is deteriorating because he's old and can't play anymore and all this different stuff. But for me, right now, because it's just a one game where he looked bad, I'm willing to chalk it up to one bad game. All right? In the 8 games prior, we talked about it earlier, Ponzi. This time last week, people were talking about Aaron Rodgers for sure coming back for another season.
Yeah, our mailbag was full of that.
Yeah, exactly. Just go look at our mailbag last week. A lot of it was Aaron Rodgers. We got to bring him back next year. All this different stuff. Now, 1 week later, after one bad game, people completely shift their narrative to Rodgers sucks. He can't come back. All this different stuff. And it's like, how about we give it a couple of weeks to see if Rodgers can bounce back? Now, if he plays as bad as he did against the Chargers, especially these next 2 weeks, then I think we can have a discussion because the Bengals defense and the Bears defenses stink. So if Rodgers stinks versus these 2 defenses, then I think we can have a discussion. But the Chargers defense is really freaking good. And, I think that quarterbacks are allowed to have, a bad game from time to time, as long as it's not a normal occurrence. And by the way, it hasn't been a normal occurrence for Rodgers this year. He's played largely pretty darn well. I'm willing to cut him some slack here. That's just my personal opinion.
Look at Josh Allen against the Dolphins. He played terrible.
Yeah, Josh Allen played terrible last week. We want to bench Josh Allen too, guys? We want to bench
Who's his backup? Mitch Trubisky?
Mitch Trubisky. You want Mitch Trubisky to start in Buffalo? honestly, I think we would want him to start because that would mean he'd play against us. But, nobody actually thinks that Josh Allen should be benched after one bad game. It's just with a guy like Rodgers who's old, where he, people have their certain narratives about him, where after one bad game, we just go right back to those narratives. Oh, he's crazy. He's old. All this different shit that people were saying coming into the season. But I'm telling you, man, if Rodgers gets 3 touchdowns, no picks, and 250 plus yards of offense this week against Cincinnati, nobody's going to remember this conversation, right? People will be right back to saying we got to bring back Aaron Rodgers, right? Especially if he wins the next 2 games, and we're sitting at, what would it be at that point? 7-4? Yeah, 7-4 if we win the next 2, and that's very doable. All right, this Cincinnati team, terrible defense. The Steelers' defense is playing better than when they played them the first time. And I still think the offense is capable of playing as well as they did the last time against Cincinnati's defense.
And I get that Rodgers is a very polarizing player in terms of media. I know a lot of people didn't like his antics off the field. But still, looking at his play on the field, he's been fine. He's been more than fine.
Yeah,
I'd say he's been better than Russell Wilson at this point.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. You want to show the stats between him and Brady at this point in his first 9 games. We showed it in the second segment here, or actually I think it was the first segment.
It was the first segment.
But, through 9 games, Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady have been pretty comparable. And by the way, the only reason why Brady has like 500 more passing yards than Rodgers is because he threw the ball more. But Rodgers had the better completion percentage. They're right around the same in touchdowns. I think Rodgers actually has the higher touchdown percentage, if I'm not mistaken. They have the same amount of interceptions. Brady has the higher interception percentage through his first 9 games in Tampa Bay. And you guys can see the advanced stats as well. They're right around the same, area in everything. Passer rating, yards per attempt, EPA per play. They're right around the same ranking in terms of where they stack up with the rest of the league. And by the way, guys, Tom Brady won the fucking Super Bowl in this season, okay? So, anybody that's saying the season is over or there's no chance or, it's no hope, it's well, at this point in Tom Brady's first season in Tampa, people are saying he was too old. People are saying he was washed up. People are saying that he had to retire, just the same exact stuff that they're saying about Aaron Rodgers. Now, I'm not saying that the Steelers are going to win the Super Bowl, all right? I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is one bad game, and by the way, Tom Brady had bad games too. Just look at that game against New Orleans. 3 picks. 3 picks. They lost that game 38-3. All right? People after that game were saying Brady needs to retire immediately. They have to bench him. All this different shit that they're saying about Rodgers right now. All I'm trying to say, man, is that quarterbacks are allowed to have a bad game. And it's more than possible for quarterbacks, especially in the first year with a new team, to get better as the season goes on, not worse, okay? So that is my message to you guys, okay? Keep the faith, at least a couple more weeks here. And if Rodgers continues to suck it up, we're going to tell you the truth, just like we told you the truth last week when we said he was the reason why the Steelers lost the game, which he was. He was terrible. He was the reason why we lost to the Chargers.
And I will say, I'm pretty sure at that point in the season, if I remember correctly, Bucs fans were asking for Kyle Trask to start over Brady.
Yes, they were asking for Kyle Trask, just like people are asking for Will Howard right now. And it's by the end of the season, I think that's going to be a silly take. That's just my opinion, though.
Exactly.
Christopher with a 5 says, how do you feel about drafting left tackle first round? I've given up on Broderick. We'll see how the season goes, Christopher. But I would say this. I'm not picking up Broderick's 5th-year option.
Not right now.
Tell you that right now, man. And if Broderick really stinks down the stretch, then yeah, left tackle once again becomes a talking point for the Steelers. I guess we'll just have to see, though, what ends up happening at that spot. And Broderick's played pretty decently at times this year. It's just he's needed some extra chip help. I'm certainly not giving him a contract extension, and I'm not giving him a 5th-year option, but
I will say
I'm open to him being the starting left tackle next year. That's kind of my final point there.
I think that if you really need chip help on every single play, like Broderick kind of has been needing sometimes, especially in the AFC North where you have a bunch of good pass rushers, it's kind of hard to be an elite blindside blocker and have a good offense whenever you're getting immediate pressure. And Rodgers kind of felt that last week against the Chargers, especially Khalil Mack was bullying whoever he was lined up against.
Yeah. So this week we're obviously taking on the Bengals, Ponzi. I think the Steelers are going to bounce back, and I think the Steelers will win their next 2 games. I do, and I think that there's a better chance than people give them credit for of beating the Bills at home 3 weeks from now. I think that there is a very realistic scenario here where over the next 4 weeks, okay, so you've got Cincinnati, Chicago, Buffalo, and Baltimore. During that 4-game stretch, I think the Steelers will go 3-1.
Yeah.
All right? I think, you pick whatever game you think they'll lose, but I think they'll go 3-1 during that stretch. And if that happens, then obviously we're looking at 7-5. Going down the home stretch. And at that point, you just need to win 3 of your last 5 to be able to get to 10-7.
And I will say,
and I think that's more than doable.
The one that I would want to lose the most is Buffalo, because I'd rather win against the Ravens.
Yeah,
just because that's obvious, but
the divisional, the tiebreakers and such. It'd be nice to win in Baltimore for sure. But yeah, man, I think that over the next 4 weeks, I think we're talking about the Steelers winning 3 of those 4.
I hope so.
And I think it all starts on Sunday at home against the team they desperately want some much-needed revenge against. And I think that I'm going to call it right now. I think they win by multiple scores. I think that it's going to be a very convincing victory for the black and gold. I think Rodgers will bounce back. I think the defense will play much better than they did the first time these two teams met. And I think that this will be a very good game for the Pittsburgh Steelers to get right after a really tough loss against Los Angeles last week. Again, guys, join us for our watch party. It all starts at 12:30 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. Now, before we go here, Ponzi, just a quick word on Thursday night football tonight. Patriots versus Chargers, or not Chargers, Patriots versus Jets. No Garrett Wilson. Obviously, no Sauce and no Quinnen Williams because they traded them away.
This should be.
We all know this should be the Patriots. And last week we were talking about, maybe the Raiders win against the Broncos.
That was a close game.
And it was close, all right? So this one might be closer than people think, but like on paper, there's no way they should be in this game, right? Talking about the Jets. So we've seen these divisional Thursday night matchups be weird all season long. I mean, just look at the Steelers game when we lost to the Bengals. It was just a weird divisional matchup on Thursday night football, right? So you never know what's going to happen, but I have to go with the Patriots.
You know what? Going with the unknown, the Twilight Zone. Justin Fields balls out, and the Patriots are frauds.
All right, I guess we'll see on Sunday who was right. All right, man, that'll be it for today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in here today, guys. We'll catch you with some more Steelers content tomorrow and on Saturday, all leading up to our watch party on Sunday starting at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So until then, guys, here we go, Steelers.